It was a cold, gray morning in February 1957, the kind of day where the air bites at your fingertips and the sky seems to hold its breath. In the quiet, wooded area of Fox Chase, a suburb on the northern edge of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the world was about to shift. A young man, barely out of his teens, trudged through the underbrush, his boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. He was a trapper, checking his muskrat lines, a solitary task that suited his preference for silence over the clamor of city life. The woods were his refuge, a place where the chaos of the world felt distant. But on this morning, February 25, 1957, those woods would offer no peace. As he pushed through a tangle of brambles, his eyes caught something out of place, a flash of cardboard, weathered and damp, half hidden beneath a low-hanging branch. It was a box, the kind you'd expect to hold a bassinet or a piece of furniture, discarded carelessly in this forgotten corner of the city. Curiosity tugged at him, a faint unease settling in his chest. He approached, his breath visible in the chilly air, and nudged the box with his foot. It was heavier than it should have been. The cardboard sagged, stained by days of exposure to the elements. He crouched down, peering inside, and what he saw froze him in place. There, nestled in the folds of a tattered blanket, was the body of a small boy. His tiny frame was curled, almost as if he were sleeping, but the pallor of his skin and the stillness of his form told a different story. His eyes were closed, his face bruised, his body emaciated. The boy couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, his hair cropped short, his limbs fragile and bare. The trapper stumbled back, his heart pounding, the quiet of the woods now deafening. He didn't touch the box again. He didn't need to. He knew what he'd found was no accident, no lost child who'd wandered too far. This was something darker, something that would haunt him for the rest of his days. He ran, his legs carrying him faster than he thought possible, back to the nearest road, where he flagged down a passing car. The driver, a middle-aged man on his way to work, listened as the trapper stammered out what he'd seen. Together, they drove to a payphone, the trapper's hands shaking as he dialed the Philadelphia Police Department. Within hours, the quiet woods of Fox Chase were swarming with officers, their flashlights cutting through the late afternoon gloom. The box was cordoned off, the area sealed, but the discovery was only the beginning. This wasn't just a body. This was a mystery that would grip a city, a nation, and even the world, a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The boy in the box, as he would come to be known, was more than a victim. He was a question mark, a silent plea for answers that no one could provide. Who was he? Who had left him there, discarded like trash in a forgotten corner of Philadelphia? And why? These questions burned in the minds of the officers who stood over that cardboard box, their faces grim as they took in the scene. The boy's body was carefully removed, wrapped gently in a clean blanket, and taken to the morgue. But even as the police began their work, the weight of the unknown settled over them like a fog. The discovery in Fox Chase was just the first tick of the clock. What lay ahead was a labyrinth of clues, heartbreak, and a search for truth that would span decades. The woods of Fox Chase had whispered their secret, but it was a secret that refused to be fully told. The Philadelphia morgue was a cold, sterile place, its walls echoing with the quiet grief of lives cut short. On that late February day in 1957, the body of the boy found in the Fox Chase woods arrived under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Pathologists and detectives gathered around the small, frail figure laid out on the steel table. The boy was no more than 4 feet tall, weighing barely 30 pounds, his body bearing the unmistakable signs of malnutrition. His skin was pale, almost translucent, marred by bruises that told a story of suffering. His hair, once blonde, had been crudely cut, strands of it clinging to the tattered blanket he'd been wrapped in. The sight was enough to make even the most seasoned investigators pause, their breaths catching in their throats. The autopsy began with meticulous care, each detail recorded with a precision that belied the growing sense of dread in the room. The boy's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, the report would later state, but the injuries told a more complex story. His body bore multiple contusions, some fresh, others older, suggesting a pattern of abuse that stretched back weeks, perhaps months. His stomach was empty, save for a small amount of undigested food, hinting at starvation in the days before his death. The blanket, a cheap, coarse fabric, offered no clues to his identity. It was stained and worn, but nothing about it pointed to a specific place or person. The cardboard box, too, was a dead end, a mass-produced container from a local furniture store, one of thousands sold in the area. Detectives stood by, their notebooks open, as the pathologist noted the boy's physical characteristics. He was approximately 3 to 5 years old, with blue eyes and a slight frame that spoke of neglect. His hands and feet were wrinkled, as if he'd been submerged in water before his death, though the coroner couldn't say why. Perhaps he'd been bathed to wash away evidence, or perhaps it was something more mundane, like a long soak in a tub. The questions piled up faster than the answers. Who was this child? Why had no one reported him missing? In a city of over 2 million people, how could a boy simply vanish without a trace? The police photographed the boy's face, carefully preparing images for public release. They hoped someone, a neighbor, a teacher, a relative, would recognize him. The photos were haunting, the boy's face serene yet marked by the violence he'd endured. Flyers were printed, thousands of them, distributed across Philadelphia and beyond. They appeared on telephone poles, in shop windows, and in newspapers, each one pleading for information about America's unknown child. The name stuck, a somber moniker that captured the tragedy of his anonymity. If you're gripped by the mystery of cases like this, hit subscribe and join us at the Crime O'Clock, where every case is a ticking mystery waiting to be solved. As the days passed, the initial horror of the discovery gave way to frustration. Tips poured in, but none led to a breakthrough. A neighbor thought the boy looked like a child she'd seen playing in a nearby park. A shopkeeper recalled a woman buying a similar cardboard box weeks earlier. Each lead was chased with fervor, only to dissolve into nothing. The boy's face became a fixture in the city, a silent accusation that no one could answer. The police, desperate for any clue, began to wonder if the truth lay not in what they could see, but in what had been carefully hidden. The box, the blanket, the boy himself, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture they formed was still out of reach. The streets of Philadelphia buzzed with whispers in the days following the grim discovery in Fox Chase. By early March 1957, the boy in the box had become more than a case. He was a specter haunting the city's conscience. Newspapers splashed his story across their front pages, the headlines screaming of a child abandoned, his identity erased. The grainy photograph of his face, carefully retouched to soften the marks of death, stared out from every newsstand, pleading for recognition. Families gathered around their radios, listening as broadcasters described the unknown child, their voices heavy with a mix of sorrow and urgency. In a city proud of its history and community, the idea that a child could be discarded so callously felt like a betrayal. The Philadelphia Police Department was under pressure like never before. Detectives worked around the clock, their precinct a hive of activity as they sifted through the flood of calls pouring in. Concerned citizens reported missing children, distant cousins, or neighbors' kids who vaguely matched the description. Each tip was a flicker of hope, but most fizzled out quickly. A mother in South Philly swore the boy was her nephew, only for the child to be found safe at home. A teacher in Germantown thought he resembled a student, but the records didn't match. The city was desperate to claim the boy, to give him a name, but the truth remained elusive, slipping through their fingers like smoke. The boy's anonymity gnawed at the detectives assigned to the case. They called him America's unknown child in their reports, a name that carried both tenderness and despair. They pored over missing persons files, combing through records from Philadelphia, neighboring counties, and even nearby states. Surely, someone must have noticed a child gone missing, a parent, a sibling, a friend. Yet, no report matched the boy's description. No frantic mother had come forward. No father had called to claim him. The absence of a missing persons report was as baffling as the crime itself. Was he an orphan? A runaway? Or had someone ensured his disappearance would go unnoticed? As the investigation deepened, the police turned their attention to the community around Fox Chase. The woods where the boy was found were not remote. They were a stone's throw from homes, schools, and churches. Someone must have seen something. A stranger lingering, a car idling too long, a figure carrying a box into the trees. Officers went door to door, their questions met with shaken heads and nervous glances. The residents of Fox Chase were tight-knit, wary of outsiders, but even they could offer little. A few recalled seeing a battered car parked near the woods days before the discovery, but no one could agree on its make or color. Another mentioned a woman with a small child, seen walking along Susquehanna Road, but the memory was vague, dissolving under scrutiny. The boy in the box was no longer just a body. He was a symbol of a city's failure to protect its own. As the weeks turned into months, the initial shock gave way to a grim determination. The police vowed to find answers, not just for the boy, but for the city that had adopted him in death. Yet, with every passing day, the trail grew colder, and the questions grew louder. How could a child vanish from a city of millions without a trace? And what kind of person could commit such an act, then fade back into the shadows? The woods of Fox Chase, once a quiet refuge, had transformed into a grim stage for one of Philadelphia's most perplexing mysteries. By late February 1957, the patch of land where the boy in the box was found had been combed over by detectives, forensic experts, and uniformed officers, each searching for something, anything, that could point to the truth. The cardboard box, now carefully preserved in an evidence locker, was their first focus. It was a simple container, about 3 feet long, originally used to ship a bassinet from a J.C. store. The store's records showed thousands of such boxes sold in the Philadelphia area, making it nearly impossible to trace. The label, though faded, offered no unique markings, no handwritten notes, no fingerprints. It was as if the box itself was designed to reveal nothing. The blanket, too, was a puzzle. It was a cheap, cotton fabric, faded to a dull beige, with a pattern of faint plaid lines. Forensic analysts examined it under microscopes, searching for fibers, stains, or anything that might link it to a specific place or person. They found traces of hair, not the boy's, but someone else's, too degraded to provide a clear lead. The blanket had been cut, its edges ragged, as if someone had torn it to fit the box. Was it a deliberate act to obscure its origins, or simply the work of someone in a hurry? The question lingered, unanswered, as the evidence was catalogued and stored. The boy's body offered the most haunting clues. His hands and feet were wrinkled, as if soaked in water for too long, a detail that puzzled investigators. Had he been submerged before being placed in the box? The coroner noted surgical scars on his ankle and groin, faint but precise, suggesting medical procedures at some point in his short life. These scars hinted at a history, perhaps a hospital visit, a doctor's care, but without a name, they led nowhere. His hair, roughly cropped, was another enigma. Clumps of it were found in the box, as if cut just before or after his death. Was this an attempt to alter his appearance, to make him harder to recognize? The thought sent a chill through the detectives. Investigators scoured the crime scene for anything overlooked. A few feet from the box, they found a man's blue cap, worn and stained, but no one could say if it was related. Tire tracks, faint and partial, marked the dirt near the road, but the winter ground was too hard to yield clear impressions. The woods themselves seemed to guard their secrets, the bare trees offering no witnesses, the underbrush swallowing any trace of the person who had left the boy behind. The police expanded their search, checking nearby dumpsters, vacant lots, and riverbanks, hoping for a discarded clue, a piece of clothing, a weapon, anything. But the trail was maddeningly barren. If you're drawn to the chilling details of cases like this, hit subscribe and join us at the Crime O'Clock, where every case is a ticking mystery waiting to be solved. The clues from Fox Chase were sparse, but they painted a picture of a crime both calculated and careless. The boy had been discarded, yet the effort to conceal his identity suggested a perpetrator who feared discovery. As detectives pieced together these fragments, they couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots. But the clock was ticking, and the trail was growing colder by the day. By the spring of 1957, the boy in the box had become a fixture in Philadelphia's collective consciousness, his face etched into the minds of a city desperate for answers. The Philadelphia Police Department, under mounting pressure, launched an exhaustive campaign to identify the child they now called America's unknown child. Detectives fanned out across the city, their mission clear but daunting: find someone, anyone, who recognized the boy. Flyers bearing his image were plastered on every available surface: bus stops, grocery stores, community centers. Newspapers ran daily updates, each article pleading for a breakthrough. Radio stations broadcast descriptions of the boy, his slight frame, his blue eyes, his close-cropped hair, hoping to jog a memory somewhere in the vast urban sprawl. The police began with the basics, cross-referencing missing children reports from across Pennsylvania and neighboring states. They combed through school records, orphanage logs, and hospital admissions, looking for a boy who matched the description: 3 to 5 years old, blonde, underweight, with signs of medical procedures. The surgical scars on his ankle and groin were a focal point. Perhaps he'd been treated at a local hospital, or maybe a clinic had records of a child with similar marks. Detectives visited pediatricians, showing the boy's photograph, but no one recalled a patient who fit the profile. The absence of a missing persons report continued to baffle them. In a city where neighbors knew each other's business, how could a child slip through the cracks? The investigation widened, reaching into the underbelly of Philadelphia's social services. Officers interviewed foster care workers, suspecting the boy might have been a ward of the state, shuffled between homes until he vanished. They checked with local churches, community groups, even traveling carnivals that had passed through the area, wondering if the boy belonged to a transient family. Each lead was pursued with dogged determination, but the results were the same: nothing. The boy seemed to have no past, no family, no trace of existence before that cardboard box in Fox Chase. The detectives began to wonder if his anonymity was deliberate, the work of someone who knew how to erase a life. Public response was overwhelming but often unhelpful. Hundreds of calls flooded the police hotline, each one a mix of hope and desperation. A woman in Kensington claimed the boy was her cousin's son, missing for months, but the family produced the child, alive and well. A man in North Philly swore he'd seen the boy begging on a street corner, but the timeline didn't match. The sheer volume of tips stretched the department thin, yet they followed every one, knowing that even a single detail could break the case open. As weeks turned into months, the hunt for the boy's identity took on a life of its own. The police released more details to the public, hoping to spark recognition: the blanket's plaid pattern, the bassinet box, the boy's wrinkled hands and feet. They even circulated a plaster cast of his face, a haunting replica displayed at community meetings. Yet, with each dead end, the frustration grew. The boy was more than a case file. He was a child, someone's son, and his silence demanded justice. The detectives vowed to keep searching, but the weight of the unknown pressed harder, a reminder that the truth was still out there, buried in the shadows of a city that refused to forget. As the summer of 1957 settled over Philadelphia, the boy in the box case had woven itself into the fabric of the city's psyche. The police, now months into the investigation, faced a growing web of theories, each one a flicker of possibility that promised answers but often led to dead ends. The absence of a clear suspect or motive forced detectives to explore every angle, no matter how far-fetched. Was the boy a victim of a family tragedy, his death covered up to avoid shame? Had he been abandoned by a desperate parent? Or worse, sold to someone who saw him as disposable? The questions multiplied, each one pulling the investigators deeper into a maze with no exit. One early theory centered on the possibility of a domestic cover-up. The boy's malnutrition and signs of abuse pointed to a home where neglect was routine. Detectives canvassed neighborhoods near Fox Chase, questioning families with young children, looking for gaps in their stories. They investigated reports of reclusive households, places where curtains stayed drawn and children were rarely seen. One lead pointed to a couple in a nearby suburb, known for their secretive behavior, but a search of their home revealed nothing: no trace of the boy, no evidence of a crime. Another theory suggested the boy was an orphan, perhaps from an institution where records were shoddy or deliberately falsified. Orphanages were checked, but the boy's face didn't match any known residents. Then came the more chilling theories. Some detectives speculated the boy might have been a victim of human trafficking, a dark undercurrent in any large city. Philadelphia's ports and rail lines made it a hub for transient populations, and the police followed tips about shady figures seen with children in tow. A vague report of a man and a boy near the woods days before the discovery led to a composite sketch, but no one came forward to identify him. Another theory, darker still, whispered of a cult or ritualistic act, fueled by the boy's unusual physical state, his wrinkled hands, his crudely cut hair. But no evidence supported such claims, and the idea faded into the realm of rumor. Suspects emerged, only to slip away. A local handyman, known for odd behavior, was questioned after neighbors reported him burning trash near the woods. His alibi held, and no physical evidence linked him to the scene. A woman who worked at a nearby diner mentioned a customer who'd spoken nervously about a missing child, but the man was never found. Each suspect was a shadow, fleeting and insubstantial, leaving the police grasping at air. The lack of progress gnawed at the detectives. They revisited the crime scene, hoping for a missed clue, but the woods remained stubbornly silent. The boy's photograph was redistributed, now with an artist's rendering of what he might have looked like alive, smiling, healthy. It was a heartbreaking image, one that tugged at the city's heartstrings but yielded no breakthroughs. The theories piled up: abduction, accident, murder, but without a name or a family. They were just stories. The police knew the truth was out there, hidden in the details they hadn't yet uncovered. But the trail was growing colder, and the boy's silence was louder than ever. By late 1957, the boy in the box case had settled into a frustrating rhythm of false leads and fading hope, but a new development was about to shake the investigation to its core. In 1960, nearly 3 years after the boy's body was found, a woman known only as M walked into a Philadelphia police station. Her demeanor was nervous, her eyes darting as she spoke in hushed tones to the detective on duty. She claimed to have a story that could finally give a name to America's unknown child. The detectives, weary but desperate for a break, listened intently as M began to unravel a tale so disturbing it would haunt the case for decades. M was a librarian, soft-spoken and unassuming, living in a quiet Philadelphia suburb. She said she'd kept her secret for years, tormented by guilt and fear, until the weight of it became unbearable. According to M, the boy in the box was named Jonathan, the son of her abusive stepfather and a young woman who'd lived in their household. She claimed her stepfather had purchased the boy from his biological mother, a desperate woman unable to care for him. The transaction, M said, was cold and transactional, the kind of deal that thrived in the shadows of a city with too many secrets. Jonathan, she alleged, had lived in their home for years, hidden from the world, subjected to neglect and violence. M's story grew darker. She described a night in February 1957 when her stepfather's rage boiled over. Jonathan, weak and malnourished, had vomited during dinner, enraging the man. In a fit of anger, M said, her stepfather struck the boy, slamming his head against a wall. The child collapsed, lifeless. Panicked, the stepfather wrapped the body in a blanket, placed it in a cardboard box from their basement, and drove to the Fox Chase woods to dispose of it. M claimed she was forced to help, her silence bought with threats of violence. The boy's hair, she said, was cut to obscure his identity, and his body was bathed to remove any trace of their home. The detectives were stunned. M's story was detailed, chilling, and filled with specifics that seemed to fit the case. The box, the blanket, the boy's condition. They pressed her for more, but she grew evasive, refusing to name her stepfather or provide proof. The police investigated her claims, searching the house she described, but found no evidence to corroborate her story. The stepfather, now deceased, couldn't be questioned, and neighbors had no memory of a boy matching Jonathan's description. M's mental health came under scrutiny. Some detectives wondered if her story was a fabrication, born of trauma or delusion. Yet her account was so vivid, so specific, that it lingered in their minds. M's story, whether truth or fiction, added a new layer to the boy in the box case. It was a lead that promised answers, but delivered only more questions. Was M a witness to a horrific crime, or a troubled soul weaving a tale to ease her own pain? The detectives couldn't dismiss her, but they couldn't prove her story either. The boy remained nameless, his story trapped in the shadows of M's haunting confession. Decades passed, and the boy in the box remained a ghostly presence in Philadelphia, his case a stubborn wound that refused to heal. By the late 1990s, the investigation had long gone cold. The original detectives retired or deceased, their files gathering dust in a police archive. But the dawn of modern forensic science brought a flicker of hope to America's unknown child. Advances in DNA technology, unavailable in 1957, offered a chance to unlock secrets hidden in the evidence. The boy's body, preserved with care in a city morgue, became the focal point of a renewed effort to give him a name and his killer a face. In 1998, investigators exhumed the boy's remains, a somber task carried out under the watchful eyes of a small team of forensic experts. The goal was simple but groundbreaking: extract DNA from the boy's tissue and compare it to national databases. The process was delicate. The body had been embalmed, and decades of storage had degraded potential evidence. Yet, scientists managed to isolate mitochondrial DNA, a type passed through maternal lines, offering a potential link to relatives. The sample was run through early DNA databases, but no matches were found. The technology, still in its infancy, couldn't deliver the miracle the city hoped for, but it reignited interest in the case. The cardboard box, blanket, and other evidence were also re-examined with new tools. Forensic analysts used advanced fiber analysis to study the blanket, hoping to trace its origin, but the fabric was too common, its trail lost in the mass production of the 1950s. The box, too, remained a dead end, its manufacturer long out of business. Investigators turned to the boy's hair, testing it for chemical traces that might reveal his diet or environment. The results suggested prolonged malnutrition, confirming the autopsy's findings, but offered no clues to his identity. The surgical scars, once a tantalizing lead, were too generic to point to a specific hospital or procedure. By the 2000s, the case had drawn the attention of the Vidic Society, a group of forensic experts and retired detectives dedicated to solving cold cases. They pored over the boy's file, re-interviewing witnesses and chasing down old leads with fresh eyes. One theory revisited M's confession, using modern profiling to assess its credibility, but without physical evidence, it remained unprovable. The society also pushed for public awareness, ensuring the boy's face, now recreated with digital imaging, stayed in the media. If you're fascinated by the power of science to unravel decades-old mysteries, hit subscribe and join us at the Crime O'Clock, where every case is a ticking mystery waiting to be solved. In 2022, a breakthrough seemed imminent when Philadelphia police announced renewed DNA efforts, leveraging cutting-edge genealogical databases. By cross-referencing the boy's DNA with public ancestry records, they hoped to find distant relatives, a method that had cracked other high-profile cold cases. The process was painstaking, building family trees from faint genetic matches, but the results were inconclusive. The boy's lineage remained elusive, his DNA a solitary marker in a sea of data. Yet, the effort kept the case alive, a testament to a city's refusal to forget. The boy in the box was no closer to a name, but the tools of modern science had given his story a new pulse, a faint beat that promised answers might still be out there, waiting to be found. As the decades rolled on, the boy in the box became more than a case. He became a symbol of loss and a rallying cry for justice. By the 2000s, Philadelphia's residents had embraced America's unknown child as their own, a child whose anonymity struck a deep chord in a city that prided itself on community. Vigils were held in Fox Chase, where candles flickered in the same woods where he was found, their light a quiet promise to keep his memory alive. Community groups, amateur sleuths, and even school children raised funds to maintain his grave, a small plot marked by a simple stone that read, "America's unknown child." The boy had no name, but he had a city that refused to let him fade. The media played a relentless role, keeping the case in the public eye. Television specials, newspaper features, and early internet forums dissected every detail: the box, the blanket, the haunting image of his face. True crime enthusiasts pored over the case, their theories filling message boards and sparking heated debates. Was he a foster child, slipped through the cracks of a broken system? A victim of a transient family, lost to the city's underbelly? Or was his death a calculated act, hidden by someone who knew how to erase a life? The public's fascination grew, fueled by the mystery's refusal to yield answers. Each anniversary of his discovery brought renewed calls for tips, with billboards and posters pleading for someone to come forward. The police, too, felt the weight of public expectation. Detectives assigned to the case, many of whom had inherited it from their predecessors, spoke of a personal connection to the boy. They carried his photo in their wallets, a reminder of the promise they'd made to give him a name. Community pressure led to the formation of task forces, with retired officers and forensic experts volunteering their time. Fundraisers supported new DNA tests, and local businesses donated resources to keep the case visible. The boy's story had become a shared mission, a collective refusal to let the truth slip away. Yet, for all the outcry, the mystery endured. Tips continued to trickle in. A woman claiming her brother had confessed to the crime. A man recalling a strange neighbor from 1957, but none panned out. The internet age brought new challenges, with misinformation spreading as quickly as hope. False confessions and wild theories cluttered the investigation, forcing police to sift through noise to find signal. If you're gripped by stories that unite communities in a quest for justice, hit subscribe and join us at the Crime O'Clock, where every case is a ticking mystery waiting to be solved. The boy in the box had become a legend, his story etched into Philadelphia's soul. Schools taught about him in history classes, and artists painted murals of his face, a silent plea for recognition. The public's passion kept the case alive, but it also underscored the tragedy. A child, loved in death by thousands, had been forgotten in life. As the years stretched on, the question lingered. Would the city's devotion finally uncover the truth, or would the boy remain forever unknown, a ghost in the heart of Philadelphia? The boy in the box, America's unknown child, remains one of the most haunting mysteries in Philadelphia's history, a case that has lingered like a shadow over the city for nearly 7 decades. As the years have stretched into the 2020s, the boy's story has transcended the confines of a police file, becoming a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the tenacity of those who seek justice. His small grave, tended by strangers who adopted him as their own, stands as a quiet testament to a city's refusal to forget. Yet, despite the tireless efforts of detectives, forensic experts, and a community bound by grief, the boy's name and the truth of his fate remain locked away, hidden in a past that refuses to speak. The case has left an indelible mark, not just on Philadelphia, but on the broader landscape of true crime. It has inspired countless documentaries, books, and podcasts, each grappling with the same unanswerable questions. Who was he? Who could have done this? The boy's story has become a touchstone for cold case investigations, a benchmark for the limits of science and determination. Every few years, a new lead surfaces, a DNA match, a fresh tip, a re-examined piece of evidence. But each time, the hope fades, leaving the mystery intact. The boy's face, reconstructed with modern technology, still gazes out from posters and websites, a silent challenge to anyone who might hold the key. The legacy of the boy in the box is one of paradox. He is both forgotten and unforgettable, a child no one claimed in life, yet mourned by thousands in death. His case has spurred advances in forensic science, from DNA profiling to genealogical tracing, yet those advances have not cracked the wall of silence surrounding him. It has united a community, from the police who vowed to solve it to the citizens who light candles at his grave, yet it has also exposed the cracks in a system that allowed a child to vanish unnoticed. The boy's story is a call to action, a reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, is worth pursuing. As we stand here in 2025, the clock continues to tick on this unsolved mystery. Could the answer lie in a forgotten memory, a hidden record, or a distant relative's DNA? Or is the truth buried too deep, lost to time and the careful work of someone who wanted it to stay hidden? What do you think really happened? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the Crime O'Clock, because the next mystery might already be ticking. The boy in the box, America's unknown child, still waits for his name, his story a whisper in the wind, urging us to listen, to search, to never give up.